And we have food manufacturing areas, predominantly located in our Rochester headquarter town, and as well as 3 different distribution centers. And that's really where our story begins. I'm going to talk about a pilot that we did in one of our Rochester distribution centers around exoskeleton use. And during the talk, I hope to cover our design, some results, conclusions, and leave you with a few key takeaways if you're considering implementing exoskeletons in your area. Now, our distribution centers are not unlike most distribution centers out there. The majority of the incidents that we see in grocery warehousing are really musculoskeletal disorders affecting the low back and the torso region. So in our case, over 50% of our injuries in our warehouses are these musculoskeletal disorders. And they're due to lifting and lowering and bending and stooping. And this is really the sweet spot where back exoskeletons are supposed to be preventing injuries. Now, we've been spending decades working on engineering controls within our distribution centers, doing administrative controls like teaching all of the workforce things like power lift, body mechanics, but yet we still have these musculoskeletal disorders. So back in about 2020, we started talking about exoskeletons, the potential usage for those to help us get at these. We brought in both passive and active exoskeletons and had our trainers, our selectors who are also trainers, really be the ones to do that first cut and say, what do we like better? They were able to test out some different exoskeletons, both, like I said, passive and active, for a good chunk of time, like 4 hours, and then switch and do the others. And it was pretty clear at the end of a couple of days of testing these out that they really like the active exoskeletons better. So that's where we got into a partnership with a company called Verve Motion, and they're a spin-off out of Harvard University. At the time, they were looking for different companies, a handful of companies to partner with, because they were really at the beginning of their journey. So what we ended up doing our pilot on was like their Verve 1.0 exosuit. And let me just talk a little bit about the actual active exoskeleton itself. The exosuit's made up of a couple of different portions. You've got a backpack portion. This is where the motors are and a lot of the sensors. That's connected by way of those red straps to 2 thigh wraps that secure the bottom part of the exosuit to the wearer. There's also sensors located in the thigh wraps, and as the robotics within the exosuit monitor, all of these sensors are taking into account back angle, forward flexion, extension, twisting, as well as the velocity of motion and the direction of motion. So it knows when the back reaches a certain point and the user starts to come up with it, that it should fire. And what it does then is essentially retract or pull in that red strap, and it creates a moment about the hips, and it assists the wearer in lifting the item. It basically acts as an external muscle firing in parallel with the user's muscles. This particular suit was pretty lightweight, easy to put on and take off, had good battery life, and those batteries are also located in the upper portion of the backpack. All right, so with our pilot design, we had a hypothesis, and that was that the exosuit would actually reduce the risk of lifting-related musculoskeletal disorders by doing 2 things. First, by directly offloading the weight from the back, we would get decreased risk. And secondly, by modifying the selector's lifting postures by providing some feedback on certain high-risk postures. So I said that this exosuit has a lot of sensors and it's monitoring things all the time. Before we started this pilot, we defined 4 risky postures that we wanted it to keep track of. and had to do with excessive forward bending, twisting motions, lateral bending, things like that. So it was keeping track of those, and we hoped that by providing feedback to the wearer that we would indeed change their lifting behavior over time. So as we were putting this together, this was probably end of 2020, beginning of 2021, and what better time to start a long-term pilot than in the middle of COVID. We came up with 4 key performance indicators, and that was really to say, what is success going to look like when we finish this pilot? Our first one was that the suit would actually decrease the risk of back injury. And the second, the suit wouldn't add any unanticipated adverse effects. We didn't want to trade back injuries for, say, hip injuries or knee injuries or something like that with the folks wearing the suit. The third one was that the suit wouldn't inhibit productivity. We weren't looking to make Superman out of people. We were just looking to make sure that we didn't lose the ability to meet production demands. And that final one was that the majority of our employees would continue to wear the suit if it was not mandated. In our environment, we were never going to take the approach of mandating an exosuit and making it permanent PPE, even if the pilot was a smashing success. All right, so we collected a lot of data. Suit usage data was something that the suit itself could keep track of, how many hours it was worn, what time of the day it was worn. It, as I mentioned, kept track of back angles and when it was firing, so it was able to calculate these safe lift scores based on those 4 risky postures that we had defined. We also collected user feedback through surveys with all of our participants at various intervals throughout the pilot. And we had productivity data based on our warehouse management system. We used that to collect all of the productivity data that aligned with wearing of the suit. And finally, incident data from our incident database. So our approach was to roll this out fairly slowly in 2 distribution centers, our produce and our grocery warehouses. And we were going to deploy 40 suits on a rolling basis. It took a little bit of momentum because this was a purely voluntary pilot to recruit enough people to participate, hence the rolling approach. For support of the whole pilot, we had a Verve technician come on site once a week, spend at least a day and a half with our folks who were participants. They also provided virtual support by way of FaceTime on an iPad. So in each of our locations where these suits were located, if on an off day a selector had a question or something wasn't fitting right or feeling right, they could go into the iPad, do a FaceTime call with a Verve tech, and get some immediate help. And then finally, we met regularly with the Verve team to review progress. And by we, I mean the corporate EHS department, specifically our ergonomics group, which I led at the time, and the on-site EHS support embedded within distribution, as well as the Verve team. Okay, so that's what the overall pilot really looked like, but in terms of our user, what was their experience? They'd come in to work, do their normal thing, go to their locker, drop off their stuff, pick up an exosuit, get their assignments at crew out, and then select product all day, take their breaks as they normally would, and then at the end of the day, just put the suit back on the rack. And this is where you'd have to take out the batteries, plug them in, and then we'd plug the suit in. And once the suit was connected, not electrically, but by way of a USB cable, all of the data from the suit was then uploaded to the Verve database where then we could analyze it. On a weekly basis, we expected them to talk to the on-site Verve support, and that's where they'd have those conversations about what's not fitting right, what's some of the feedback that each of the selectors have that they would just give right to the Verve rep. And, and at that point, that's when they got their safe lift scores in a form of a report. They knew how much weight they were getting offloaded from their back on a weekly basis, as well as how many of these risky postures they were in. So let's actually take a minute to hear, I've got a little video, we'll hear from a couple of our participants.
Hi, my name is Luke Dagout. I've been wearing the suit, I think around like a year plus. And since I've been wearing the suit, I see a big difference from my back. Because before I used to wear the suit, like every day my back ached. Go home, go shower, I sit in the couch, get up, my back ached all day long, every day. Muscle spasm. And since I've been wearing the suit now, about a year and a half, as long as the suit is adjusted right, I don't feel no pain at all. No muscles ache. Go home, I go shower, I sit in the couch, get up. Everything is fine, like I'm young again. And I'm 46. So for me, I love the suit. From day one I've been wearing the suit, I love it. It's not heavy. And I would say everybody should wear one.
I'm Ray. I've been wearing the suit for over a year now, and one of the things that I like about it is that it does take a lot of the weight off of your back after long periods of wearing it. And I never had any issues with my back per se, but one of the reasons why I got involved in the program is because I wanted to make sure I wanted to have more longevity out of it. I know a lot of people who do my job suffer from back pain, and to prevent that, I wanted to start with the suit.
So one thing I did forget to mention about how the suit works is you saw some green lights on the left shoulder of the first person. That's really the control switch. There's an on button. When the suit is off, there's really no resistance to the straps or anything like that. You walk around, it feels very transparent. And then there are two other buttons there, which were really the intensity level. You could opt for just a low level of assist or a higher level of assist. So that's really where the controls were for the suit, for the operator to pick how they wanted to experience it, depending on what they were doing. So those were two of our, I would say, most active participants who were really enthusiastic about wearing the suit, really felt the benefits of it. Not everybody felt that way, and that's how we learn. So every week, when we met with the Verve representatives and the team, and we would go over the utilization of the suits and talk about what we were seeing and potential problems, very early on we noticed that our participation was not steady at all. It really felt like we were losing people left and right, and this was not going to be successful. And what we ended up doing early on is to say we need to engage more of our warehouses. We then brought in 2 more warehouses, so we would have a larger selection of people who might be willing to try the suits and interested in participating. We also started recruiting at new hire training. Now, I mentioned this was in the height of COVID. We actually were having new hire training every week where we were trying to bring in new folks to be selectors within our warehouses. And eventually, we put in a participation agreement with new selectors. And that included them signing off to say, hey, if I'm going to join this pilot, I'm going to stay in it for 4 weeks at least before I make a decision of whether I don't want to wear the suit or I will keep wearing the suit. They also committed to wearing the suit at 50% of the time. Now, because this was 100% voluntary, they also determined when they wore the suit, what jobs they were doing when they wore the suit or not. So it could be that this 50% of the time was made up of a day on, a day off, a day on, a day off, or half a day on, half a day off. They chose when to wear the suit. All right, so we had lots of data. And during the analysis period, we really focused in on a couple of things. One, those 4 key performance indicators. Were we meeting those so we could call this a success or not? And additionally, we wanted to look at the data to see if we could identify optimal applications for the exosuit. And we'll talk about that in a sec. Okay, just reminding us, so what was that first KPI? It was, did the suit lower the risk of back injury? So looking at the data, the weight offloaded per person per week was around 13,000 pounds offloaded from their backs. By the end of the pilot, we had offloaded over 10 million pounds of weight on the selectors. And we estimated about a 20% reduction in risk just from that weight decrease. Our survey results also supported this KPI. About 97% of the respondents said that their muscles were less sore at the end of the day, and 83% said they were less fatigued by the end of the day. In those safe lift scores, we did see some changes in people's behavior. Over roughly 3 months, we saw a 20% decrease in the number of risky postures that they got into doing the regular jobs the selection jobs. And finally, when we looked at our injury data, and we compared the injury data of the folks in the pilot versus their counterparts who were selecting without exoskeletons. During the pilot, we had 0 musculoskeletal disorders related to lifting and lowering in the torso over a 21-month period for that exosuit population, which is about 26,000 hours of selection time that they went injury-free with it. And the control group, essentially the folks who were not wearing suits, we, in that same period of time, would expected and did see around 2 to 3 musculoskeletal related incidents of the back for that group. All right, the second KPI was about any adverse effects, excuse me. What we did see was about 6% of our selectors initially did experience some shoulder discomfort. And this was especially true in our produce warehouse, where a lot of the lifts were over shoulder height, very tall pallets. Verve was very good at responding quickly, listening to the feedback of our employees, and quickly redesigned the shoulder straps and replaced them on the exoskeletons so that we saw a pretty immediate effect of eliminating that initial discomfort. We also saw some minor increases in forward bending, especially in our grocery warehouse where we have some lower racks. As you can see, that backpack portion, it's roughly, these older versions, it was roughly 5 to 6 inches deep. So that definitely led to some more forward bending in those low racks. So the third one is about productivity. And the way we measured the productivity differences and this comparison was for each employee, we looked at their performance on the days that they were wearing the suit versus the days that they weren't wearing the suit. So it was a direct comparison employee by employee. What we found that there was actually a slight increase in productivity. So we had a 1.5% productivity improvement across all of the different warehouses that we had implemented the exoskeletons. And regardless of the years of selection experience, everybody did have some amount of productivity gains. You can see with the graph to the right that they were all positive in terms of productivity improvements, but it was all over the board too. So depending on who you were, you could experience a much higher percentage of productivity improvement. And last, and that tough one, was would the employees actually wear the suit if it wasn't mandated? So I mentioned that we did a pivot and we put a line in the sand where we said, look, new employees coming in, you have to commit to a 4-week period with the suit. So we looked at our data and analyzed it for that group that didn't have the 4-week commitment period and then the group that had the 4-week commitment period. So the results of the first group, within the first 4 weeks of wearing that exosuit, we had about 35% of the participants actually became ineligible to participate in the pilot, and that's where I think we were seeing this, what's going on, everybody's just dropping like flies. And you could become ineligible because you were terminated from the company, you voluntarily left the company, or you got moved to another job that didn't involve selection or the type of selection where an exosuit made any sense at all. So you were no longer part of the study. So that only left about 65% of the population that we could do the data analysis on. And of that portion, we lost about 25% because they said, it's not worth wearing the suit. We don't see that the benefit of wearing this suit outweighs the inconvenience of putting it on and having to wear it. But that did leave about 75% retention rate. Now, when we looked at that group and we said, okay, you're still in, you want to wear the suit, well, how often are you wearing the suit? About 32% of the time. So that still doesn't feel good, like there's, like a good buy-in to this. When we looked at the same measures with the population that did have the 4-week commitment period, things went up a little bit. Yes, we were still losing folks, but with the remaining people who were eligible, we saw about an 80% retention, and the utilization was right around 50%, which was the commitment. So I mentioned that Verve at the time was actually doing this kind of a pilot with a few other companies like Wegmans and looking at the results. And some of the results in those other companies, they were finding that 50% utilization is what the minimum that you need to start to see benefits of exoskeleton usage. And the last thing that we did see is that 4-week commitment period actually helped our users realize the benefits of wearing the suit. The effects were really cumulative, and you could see by their satisfaction scores that week 1 compared to week 4, they did go up across the 4 weeks. So what did we really conclude at the end of this? Yes, the suit does decrease the risk of back injuries, at least it did in our pilot. We didn't really see significant unanticipated adverse effects. It didn't inhibit meeting productivity standards, so that was great. And when you started to look at the eligibility portion and factor that in, we actually had fairly good retention of people wanting to continue to wear the suits, but we weren't seeing anything more than 50% suit usage. So what did we learn from this whole pilot? There were some learnings on the design side of the technology, and then there were some learnings on implementing pilots and managing this kind of a program. I'll start with the design side. Every week when we were doing these meetings with the Verve crew, they were running all the reports in the background, and it was kind of clunky and cumbersome, and they soon figured out that they'd better have a better solution for that. So they introduced Verve Logic, which is kind of a cloud-based dashboard that could allow the customer, us in that case, to run our own reports and look at the utilization data by person at a specific time and slice and dice the data ourselves. I mentioned that they introduced a new shoulder strap based on some of the feedback that we got out of our produce warehouse. They also replaced the thigh straps. Throughout the pilot, especially at the beginning, they were seeing that their thigh straps really just didn't fit snugly enough, and once those things start sliding, you don't get the benefits of the activation of the suit. So they created new fabrics and designs around that. Another thing that they got out of our grocery warehouse was that even the most diehard wearers of the suit, in the summertime, they were like, I'm not wearing this, it's too hot. I want to wear it, but no way. So Verve introduced an accessory like a fan that actually mounts onto that backpack that would then circulate air within there. It allowed some of our users to wear it a little bit longer, but our grocery warehouse is unconditioned. So during the summer months, it could get pretty hot. So we still lost some participants then. And lastly, what they learned from our meat warehouse, which is where a lot of the heavy lifting takes place, is that those folks wanted a different force profile. They wanted the suit to activate at a different time. They wanted more assistance. And the pretty cool thing with Verve's technology is that they could change the force profile back at their offices, and then they could push that new force profile to only those selectors whose suits needed to be affected. So they learned some things around that, which was pretty neat. I'll just wrap things up with a few key takeaways that we learned putting this pilot together that maybe it would help you if you were interested in doing the same. Very important to establish your KPIs early, define what success looks like. Some of the good KPIs that worked for us: injury reduction, productivity improvements, employee satisfaction, and if you can, retention. That's something we couldn't measure. Use case is very important for the technology. We allowed people to try the exoskeleton in different areas of our warehouse that we were like, well, we don't know if it's gonna work all that well. And we were able to eliminate certain areas. So it's a pretty straightforward that this is gonna work better for very repetitive lifting and heavy lifting. Some of the parameters around that we found were like 10,000 to 50,000 pounds lifted in that range, 500 to 200 lifts per hour, that kind of repetition rate, and more lifts below waist height. That's really when the suit is active. It's pretty transparent when you're lifting above waist height. It doesn't actually fire, so people don't find that to be very beneficial. I think some of the less technical but more managerial things that we learned is that we had to have a high level of ownership. Leadership involvement to manage this program was critical. Truthfully, it was the team leaders who needed to be involved and understand who in their department were the ones who should be wearing the suit, have conversations with them, because some days they just weren't wearing the suit. And wearing the suit is a little like doing exercise. You know what's good for you. It feels good when you're done at the end of the exercise bout, but if you take a few days off, it's much harder to start doing exercise again. The same thing with the exosuit. Like, it's great you're wearing it, but if you take too many days off in a row, you're like, yeah, I don't think I need it, I'm fine, I'm good, and they just stopped wearing it. So that leadership involvement is critical. And also having a resource in the operational unit to partner with your vendor, in our case, Verve, so that it coordinated all of the visits between our participants and the vendor and helped to review progress and results and take some ownership. And lastly, safety culture. Having a strong safety culture in that area is going to make for implementing an initiative like this a lot easier and more sustainable. So with that, I think I've hit 0, but I think we could take a question or two if there are any. I thank you for your time and your attention.
When it was really hot, something like that. How did you deal with the people that did wear it when it got hot, if these things were shared, cleaning them?
That's a great question. So these suits were one suit per participant. They weren't shared at all. And the disinfecting process for this, they actually sprayed them down with Lysol in between usage, or to kind of disinfect these at the time, but one suit per person, they weren't shared. other questions. Well, thank you very much.